Hello guys, I'm Savvy and welcome back to another Destiny 2 build video, specifically for Warlocks. And in this one, we are going to be focusing on my Solar subclass, which is one of my favorites of all time, and I will explain why. Especially now, since Final Shape came out in June, there is a cool super that has been incorporated into the game that I think really helps out the Solar subclass instead of using Well of Radiance. But Well of Radiance can be used in its own way, but we're going to be focusing specifically on my use of Song of Flame, as well as the other aspects and fragments that I use as well. And my exotic, because as you can see, I'm using Starfire Protocol as my exotic, and we'll be getting into that a little bit later into the video. But before we actually officially begin, I would love it if you guys hit that subscribe button and be sure to hit that like button as well. That really helped me out. All the support is very appreciated, and thank you for the support on my previous build video of my Arc build that I use on my Warlock. I really appreciate that. And I'm also going to be showing some footage from a previous Solo Flawless that I did with my Solar build as well, so I'll be incorporating that. Alright, so we want to, and you're probably wondering like why my stuff is grayed out too, it's because I'm in a lost sector right now, and the reason for that is because I'm going to be showing off some cool features with this. So, let's start off with the subclass. So Dawn Blade, and I'm using the Super Song of Flame. So we're going to be focusing on this. So Song of Flame is obviously a super ability. This came with Final Shape. So it says, unleash your inner fire, making your equipped weapons radiant and enhancing your abilities. C-Press, release a supercharged melee attack that launches additional projectiles. Q-Press, create a sentient flame wisp that seeks out targets and detonates in a scorching explosion, then seeks out other nearby targets. While Song of Flame is active, you and nearby allies regenerate abilities more quickly, are more resistant to incoming damage, and your solar and kinetic weapons scorch targets. Now, as you can see, all these blue highlighted words here, these are important because of what's on the left side. So, starting off, we have Radiant. Your weapons are enhanced by the power of the Traveler and deal increased damage to combatants. While you are Radiant, your weapons pierce the shields of barrier champions and stun them. That is very important. And that's why I'm in the Lost Sector right now, is for that very reason. We have Scorch next, which is the target is singed by destructive solar light, taking damage over time. Scorch damage increases as the target accumulates more Scorch stacks. After enough Scorch stacks are applied to the target, they ignite. And then, obviously with Ignite, we have Ignition at the very bottom. A large solar explosion, which deals damage in an area around the target and stuns unstoppable champions. And that is also important. So this super alone can both take on barrier champions because of the radiance that you get, and also deal with unstoppable champions because of the ignitions that can come from it. So I'm in a lost sector right now, and I have defeated a few enemies to get my super up, including some of those champions as well, but we'll be coming across other champions in this lost sector. So I just want to show that off once we get to a point where there's more champions. So I guess I'll cut to when I actually find one. So I'll see you guys in a second. Alright, so one cool thing that we can show off is the barrier. So barrier this season is going to be the scout rifle, but I'm not going to be using that. I'm actually going to be using something that is not barrier friendly, and I'm going to be using my machine gun. So if I pop my super right now, you get radiance on the bottom left, and then watch what happens. Look at that. Look at that. My machine gun can break through this barrier, and if I use my other abilities here, as you see, I'm just tossing like a flame bird along with other things too. Now here's a champion, so I'm gonna just use my Phoenix Dive and show off the ignition that happens. So you see those scorch stacks that are happening? Once enough happens, you see how that stunned the champion on the bottom left of the screen? That's because of the ignition that happened from that explosion. It's really, really cool. And so we'll just clear out the rest of these enemies with our solar and our ignitions and everything. And as you saw, as I was using my melee and my grenades, we're going to be going over those in a few minutes. So let me just clear this out real quick. Alright, so I'm out of the Lost Sector, And now we can go over some other abilities that you saw me use, but I'm going to be mix matching with one ability in particular, and that is going to be my melee. So as you saw, I was using Celestial Fire, and what it is it sends out a spiral of 3 explosive solar energy blasts, scorching targets with each hit. And it does that scorch stacks, and it does the ignition as well if there are enough scorch stacks that are there. So with my melee not being charged yet, which I'll show in a second, this can work in tandem with the grenades that I use as well, which are fusion grenades. So an explosive grenade that attaches to targets, damaging and moderately scorching them on detonation. And what's cool is that for the Warlock is that these grenades explode twice. So I'm going to throw one on the ground right now. And you see how it has that initial burst and then it just explodes again. And on enemies, it'll do the exact same thing. So it'll attach to an enemy and it'll explode twice. Now, for these weak enemies, it's not really going to be that useful, but it'll give you the same idea, at least kind of an idea of how it works. So I'm going to throw one right there. But you saw how that explosion there just destroyed the other ones because it does a wave of solar damage. And it's pretty powerful. It's really good for ad clearing as well if you have the stacks that I have. And I actually have my grenade back now and my melee, so I can also show off my melee too. So I'm going to use that, and there we go. Just like that. And since the Dawning, a snowball is going to appear too. But yeah, it's mainly a projectile that can go longer distances instead of being close combat. I just so happen to be close there to that enemy. But you could also throw your melee from afar and it'll work just the same. Now the other melee that I like to use, which I use for my prismatic build, which I have a video on that, which I can link that at the end of this video. Right there you have the Incinerator Snap, which is pretty much, I'd say this is my favorite over the Celestial Fire. I just like using Celestial Fire for this one because of how many more Scorch stacks it has compared to this, but what's cool about the Incinerator Snap is so it says snap your fingers to create a fan of burning sparks that explode and scorch targets. Now for this melee is if all of those scorches hit one target, it'll create an ignition. I think I misspoke because I think Celestial Fire actually applies less scorch than that of Incinerator Snap, but it's dependent on how many of those fire things hit the enemies to ignite. And I love when I get error coded as well, right in the middle of this video. This is great. Awesome. Thank you. Thank you, Bungie. Thank you. Alright, so my melee is fully charged, and I'm back in this lost sector that I showed an example prior to this. And I'm just gonna go ahead and wait till he stops doing that. Snap like that, and you get the ignition right there. So that ignition right there is really good because I hit all of my snaps, all of the snaps on that target. And since he was much more powerful, I was able to hit. He was much stronger, and he was obviously much bigger of a target, so I was able to hit all of my snaps onto his body and not perish right away from the scorches themselves before the ignition happened, which can happen on its own. But, yeah. Alright. Let's move on to the next section. Alright, for this next section, we're going to be going over some of my aspects, which the only sum is 2 of them. So we have Touch of Flame, and we also have Helion. Now, if you are familiar with my prismatic build, and as I said before, I'll link it at the end of this video, so you guys can check that out. Helion is a really cool aspect that says, the molten remains of a Cabal magma launcher barrel still sing with the solar light that ended its fire. The heavens open at your command, and from them rains vengeful flame. Activate your class ability to summon a solar mortar that lobs flaming projectiles at distant targets. Targets damaged by the mortar are scorched, and if there are enough scorches, it will ignite as well. And you can see here that it also lists Scorch and Ignition. So as an example, I'm just going to go ahead and use my Phoenix Dive. And you can see the little solar ball that looks like molten lava, or whatever you want to call it. and it just tracks targets just like this, and it actually has really good range. It could track targets from a good distance like that. As you can see, that's pretty cool. And it lasts a short amount of time, but I'd say good enough to at least do maybe 2 ignitions on an enemy, especially if they're a powerful enemy. It's just really useful if you want to do big damage, especially with ignitions being fixed in the game recently, so it's really good. So then the next thing is the Touch of Flame, a radiant cinder still crackling as you hold it. With it, you could set the world aflame. Your Healing, Solar, Firebolt, and Fusion grenades have enhanced functionality. Healing Grenade improves the strength of Cure and Restoration effects applied. Consuming a Healing Grenade with heat rises also applies Restoration to nearby allies. Solar Grenade increases Linger duration. Periodically emits blobs of lava around its perimeter. Firebolt Grenade increases target search radius and maximum target count. And Fusion Grenades explodes twice. So that's where the explosion twice comes in with the Touch of Flame aspect. So that's why I was so excited, where I'm like, with the Warlock, it can explode twice. So Restoration and Cure are 2 new things that come into play with this. So Restoration, you regenerate health and shields over time, cannot be interrupted by taking damage. And Cure, you are healed in a burst of mending solar light. So yeah, Restoration is really good as well, especially with Prismatic Solar, at least with the build that I have, where if I pick up an Orb of Power, Restoration, I'll get Restoration and slowly heal over time. And as long as I keep picking up Orbs of Power, I'll keep that Restoration for however long it can be, depending on how many orbs are on the ground. Moving on to the next section, we have Fragments, and 4 of them in particular. So the first one is Ember of Searing. Defeating scorched targets grants melee energy and creates a fire sprite, a luminous concentration of solar energy. When picked up, fire sprites grant grenade energy. So let's go and get a fire sprite, shall we? Let's see if we can get one around here somewhere. Solar ability is away. And as you can see right here, that is a fire sprite. Look at that, that looks really cool. So if I pick it up, what it'll do is it'll take less time for my abilities to recharge. So let's move on to the next fragment, shall we? Alright, so we have Ember of Benevolence. So applying Restoration, Cure, or Radiant to allies grants increased grenade, melee, class, and class ability regeneration for a short duration. So this is really cool because it is a support fragment, because as it says again, applying Restoration, Cure, or Radiant to allies grants increased grenade, melee, class ability, and regeneration for a short duration. So if you're applying it to other people, then you will benefit as well from that. So it's really good. And it also has the list here of Restoration, Cure, and Radiant. So the next one is Ember of Char. Your solar ignition spreads scorch to affected targets. So with my fusion grenade, if I were to have more powerful targets, if it explodes twice, then, or the ignition, if it explodes twice, or in cases where the ignition explodes and there's enemies around it that do not die from the explosion, then they will also have that scorch applied to them. And I don't know how many stacks there would be, but you'll be able to apply more to them, and it'll take less amount of scorches for them to ignite as well. So it's just really good for that. And also you have a left side scorch and ignition there listed. And then the last one is Ember of Wonder. Rapidly defeating multiple targets with solar ignitions generates an orb of power. And that is also really important as well, because if you want to generate orbs, this is one way to do it, other than using certain type of elemental weapons or your kinetic weapons or whatever other method you use to generate orbs of power. This is also kind of that support kind of fragment that can help you out a little bit, but it's a little niche because you have to get the ignitions off, which sometimes, I mean, it can be easy to do, but depending on what you're doing and where you are in the game, it might be a little tricky, because with enemies being weak and everything, especially if you're in patrol areas. 2 last things that I definitely want to show you guys is my exotic, because as we've been going over the abilities and you saw that I had 2 grenades, it's because of Starfire Protocol. So Starfire Protocol is one of my favorite exotic armor pieces in this game, because what it does is you can see Fusion Harness. Fusion grenades have an additional charge and recharge from empowered weapon damage, with empowered weapon final blows granting more energy. Defeating targets with fusion grenades grant rift energy. So it's just really good overall. And as it says from empowered weapon damage. So the keyword is empowered because Radiant is a way of empowering your weapons. And if you're able to keep Radiant and defeat enemies with your weapons, then you'll get that recharge back pretty quickly. And on top of that, if I'm using my Song of Flame as well, which Song of Flame is really cool, because as you saw as I was throwing my bird grenade, which I'll demonstrate here. So let's say I'm going to exhaust both of my grenades here. So I'm going to pop my super, and I'm just going to keep tossing my grenades here until my super's gone. Just keep tossing them, these little birdies, and just go in different ways. Fly, my birdies, fly. Watch what happens. Look at that. Both of my grenades have returned instantly. After my super has been exhausted. Because you'd probably think like, well, since I've already used my grenades and I've popped my super and I've used the super grenades, then I'll have to wait for them to recharge. Nope. It actually recharges both of those grenades. One of them if you don't have Starfire Protocol, both of them if you have Starfire Protocol. So it's just really good. I wish that this kind of affected solar grenades or other solar grenades, but it does not. Only fusion grenades, which makes sense because fusion grenades are more so, thank you Devram for interrupting me, more so for damage purposes, and that's why I use it a lot. Because Song of Flame is used for support because it decreases the amount of damage you take, so you have damage resist from that. But not only that, I'm using it for more offense. It's like both offensive and defensive, so kind of like a balanced mix there, where I want to do a lot of damage, but I also want to be able to protect myself as well. So Song of Flame is really good for that. And also, this has only one ornament, which is Phoenix Fusion, which I'm going to be using. I'm going to keep this on forever until they probably make another ornament for it, if they do. If it's better than this one, maybe. We'll see, though. All right, but the last thing I actually want to show you guys is everything that I've explained and everything coming together and showing you guys just how powerful this build can be if you're using maybe not the right weapons, quote-unquote right weapons, but at least a weapon combination and the abilities combinations that I showed you that can really work. So for this little clip that I'll show you, I was using Edge Transit, Incinerator Snaps, my Song of Flame, obviously, Starfire Protocol, Forbearance, and Osteostriga. Before I show you guys that, please hit that like button if you haven't already. Please hit that subscribe button as well. And I'd like to give a shout out to my friend Barry Medley for being a member of the channel. And you can become a member too by hitting the join button down below. Thank you guys so much for watching. I've been Savvy, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye guys. See you later.